Jason Bowdach.
Hi everybody, I'm Jason Bowdach, CSI. I am a colorist and finishing artist and unofficial professional geek. And I'm here to talk to you about LUTs, or lookup tables, today. Now, you don't need to know everything about lookup tables because I'm hopefully going to clarify a little bit for you today. Now, what is a lookup table? Now, real quick, who in here knows what a lookup table is? Just by raise of hands. Okay, so we've got a pretty knowledgeable audience here. Who is using Final Cut Pro, or Final Cut 10, I should say? Resolve? Premiere? Unnamed? Hey, it's still valid. So what a lookup table is, and these are all different representations of a lookup table, is it's a mathematical table used to map one color space to another. Now, in English, that basically means that we are using it to convert from either, say, log to Rec 709, or we're using it to convert from ungraded to, say, a look. But what it really is, if I go ahead and open one up, if I launch this application Lattice, and I'm just going to launch our typical common R8 log C to Rec 709, it's basically a 3D cube that manipulates the colors of our image. And if I go from here, this is the LUT not applied, and if I go over here, we can see that it's sort of warping the colors. And what a LUT is it's essentially a text file that tells whatever your editor or finishing program is, change this number to this number. And in this case, we're talking about colors. Now, there are different types of lookup tables, and it's really expanding almost every day. But the general types is we have technical, we have creative, and then we have sort of a hybrid, which is a combination of both of them. Now, technical is the boring type, and I'm sorry, but I have to go through this just so you guys understand it. And technical includes the log normalization LUTs that you get from your camera manufacturer. That's ARRI, that's Sony, that's Blackmagic. That's the boring ones that come with, say, DaVinci Resolve. That's the monitor calibration LUT that your calibrator provides to you when they come and they calibrate all the monitors in your facility. And the technical VFX translation LUTs are what your VFX artists use when you send them your footage, and then they convert it so they can do their beautiful VFX work, and then they convert it so they can send it back to you. Now, that's a lot of words, and that's why they're called technical LUTs, because they do our technical conversions for us. Now, you guys probably aren't very interested in that, but it's important that you understand that they have different purposes. Now, what you guys are probably more interested is these creative or look LUTs. Now, they take your either ungraded or sort of base grade from your either in Premiere or Final Cut 10 or Resolve, and they allow us to apply a look to it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and jump into Resolve, and I happen to already be in it because PowerPoint didn't want to cooperate this evening. What else is new? And now they're just Resolve. So one second, and there we go. So if I were to go to this image and just go and apply one of these Osiris LUTs, this is a look LUT. And it's gone ahead and applied this really warm, sort of an ugly grade, if you ask me. But the purpose is that we can go ahead and apply a variety of creative looks. Now, the hybrid is probably the most interesting, and that's because what it does is it combines both the technical aspect and the creative look aspect. Now, what you'll see these as is you'll see these as specific creative looks for a specific camera. Now, you'll see these advertised all over the web for $9.99 to $7,099. And they are the Blackmagic production cinema camera, nature LUTs, and everything in between. Now, what these are doing is these are combining the Blackmagic cinema log to Rec 709 conversion with a creative look. So it's combining that technical with that creative. So you can also sort of create this on your own by just converting the footage to Rec 709 and Resolve and applying a look. But they want to make things, quote unquote, easy for you, one step, blah, blah, blah. And they do it by this one-click look. So the film emulation is probably one of the most misunderstood ones. And the film emulation LUTs came from the post-production workflow where we used to actually print back out to film. In the late 90s, early 2000s, we used to actually film on regular celluloid film, scan it in, do our editing and VFX work, and then print back out to film for our viewing experience. And when we were editing and doing VFX work, we needed to know what it was going to look like when it went back out to film. So we used a lookup table, or a LUT, to sort of emulate what it's going to look like. Now that we don't really use film that much, other than to shoot, and we don't really use it in theaters anymore, we use it to emulate it, or to basically give us that look as if we were going back out to film, and we bake it into our video files. Now, there's a couple things that I wanted to go over to keep in mind. LUTs are essentially dumb. They're black boxes. They expect perfect color balance and exposure. And if you've ever had the annoying experience of purchasing a LUT or having someone give it to you from production and applying it, and all of a sudden it looks terrible and it was supposed to work perfectly, this is why. It's because it was designed around a shot that was perfectly color balanced neutral and was perfectly exposed. If your shot is under or overexposed or is a little bit warm or cool, the LUT doesn't know that. And it's assuming that it's a neutral and perfectly exposed image. So what you might have to do is correct the image beforehand. They also break Resolve's 32-bit floating point, which is a huge feature of Resolve. Now, what that means for the non-technical people is that it clips everything above 100 and it clips everything below 0. So if, for instance, you have data that's above 100 IRE on your scopes, but you're not seeing it, if it was there and you apply a LUT, it's now gone. You're never getting that data back. And the same thing is true with the shadows. If there is data below 0, which is known as illegal values, if you're in Resolve and you're not using a LUT, you can actually use the controls to bring that data back. If you apply a LUT and it's below 0 or above 100, you have clipped that data completely. They can also be what I like to describe as subtly destructive. And what I mean by that is they can basically degrade your image in a way that you probably won't see with the human eye unless you're looking on a very large screen or you're using some tools. And what I want to do is show you really quickly how obvious this is when we actually use a tool. I have a LUT stress test here, and if I go to our test images, and if I make this large, you can see that this is a ramp of both colors and brightness values. And what this emulates is basically all the values that might appear in your image. Now, this is a very wide value, but it's much better than what you're probably going to have in a test shot. And if you apply your LUT to a test shot, you're not really going to see everything. If it doesn't have as bright of a green or as bright of or dark as a purple, you're not going to see the degradation, the degradation of the image. Now, if I apply, let's go and a popular look LUT from a package that I'm going to keep nameless. Let's go ahead and apply the KDX log. Now, you can see that this is trashing the image. All of this is banding, and this is going to come up in your image as well. It's not going to be as bad as it is right now, but it's showing that you're going to see this as noise. You're going to see this as really strange artifacts in your image that you're probably not going to know where it came from. It's just going to come up all of a sudden. And it's not going to come up in every color. We can see that greens are significantly more affected than blues. So without really putting this on a stress test, we don't really know if this LUT's going to be destructive or not. So resetting that, let's go back to our PowerPoint. So unless you put them on instruments and take a look at them, or you've designed them yourself and you know for a fact that they're not destructive, when you're passing around LUTs, it's sort of like germs. You can sort of catch a disease, it goes around and it really degrades your footage permanently. And if you put that through a post pipeline, every time at every stage, it gets further degraded. Now there's also a couple common misconceptions that I want to put to bed right here. There is no best LUT. And I sort of wanted to pull one thing from YouTube, and it was literally the first thing that came up when I put in LUT into YouTube, and I thought it literally illustrated my point perfectly. There is a right LUT for the occasion, and that might be for that camera, that might be based on a look, that might be based on how it was shot on set, but there is never a perfect or magic or something that I'm going to apply to the image that it's going to always work. LUTs do not eliminate the need for color correction and matching shots. They will apply a look, they will help us convert from a non-contrasty, unsaturated, logarithmic to Rec. 709 image. But if your shots are unmatched and they're not balanced, they're just going to look just as bad, but with the look applied. So if one shot's overexposed and the next is underexposed, and you apply a LUT to it with a look, you're going to have a look that's underexposed and then overexposed. So a lot of people think, oh, I can go spend all the money I was going to spend on a colorist on LUTs. That's not necessarily true. And the same thing is true with colorists that try and go buy LUTs instead of doing the work and building them. It really doesn't work that way. You need to put the time and energy into both do the color correction matching, and then it makes it much easier to apply the look to the whole sequence. And I'll show you what I mean by that in 1 second. This one is not really an example, but it's just a common practice. For whatever reason, the AAA blockbuster LUT, even if it is the exact LUT that was used on, say, The Darkest Hour, which we can certainly go and get that LUT, it's not going to make your footage look like The Darkest Hour. There were a significant amount of decisions made before the camera was even brought onto set, whether it's costume, production design, sets, makeup, all of this is brought into the look of the film, especially in The Darkest Hour. And that brings me to number 4. Look creation starts on set, not in post-production. If you look at films and television shows that you think are well colored or have a strong color palette, you'll see that that always starts with lighting on set or with makeup or with costume design. Altered Carbon, I think, is a great example. There's almost always sort of a green-orange paradigm going on there. And it never really sort of fades into each other. There's a strong green and a strong orange in almost every scene that they wanted to express that in. And that was shot from set with that look in mind. They couldn't just take that into post-production with a gray image and add green over here and add orange over here. So let's go into Resolve and actually have some fun with LUTs, because I know you guys love PowerPoint. Okay, so I have a bunch of log images here from a bunch of different cameras. This one's from Blackmagic, this is an ARRI, and these are red. Now, one thing I want to show you, a couple tricks, and one of them is how not to use a LUT. Now, it seems sort of weird, but one of the common things that I mentioned was using technical LUTs to convert from log to Rec. 709. But I mentioned the fact that LUTs break Resolve's 32-bit floating point. So if I don't need to use a LUT, then I probably shouldn't. So I'm going to show you something built into Resolve called the color transform effect, or color space transform. Now, this effect is included in both the free version of Resolve and Resolve Studio. And what this allows us to do is this allows us to do technical transforms built into Resolve. But it's significantly more accurate than a LUT. When I call it LUTs dumb, the color space transform is the opposite of that. It is aware and is mathematically accurate. What I mean by that is we can actually tell it this footage is Blackmagic Cinema Camera, and I want you to convert it to Rec. 709. And it's going to do that in a way that it does not clip values above 100 or below 0. Now, let me jump to this shot right here, which is an ARRI log C shot, and show you what I mean by that. Let's go to Input Color Space. I'm going to go to ARRI Alexa and Input Gamma. Give my computer 1 second. Now, Output Color Space and Output Gamma are set to use timeline. My timeline is set to Rec. 709 Gamma 2.4, which is the traditional, normal video look that you guys are used to. And by turning this on and off, we've essentially converted this from log C to Rec. 709. Now, this is a lot better than a LUT because it is aware that the video, if it happens to be overexposed, it's not going to clip those highlights. If it happens to be underexposed, it's not going to clip those or crush those shadows and basically clip out those values below 0. And it has this tone mapping and gamut mapping effect that allows us to, if those values do happen to be outside of those range, it folds it right into those range for us. So we can start grading with all of our data and color values inside our scopes. So if I go over to our scopes right here and I turn this off, we can see that we have some values going above 1023 right here, which means there technically could be clipping out. Now, I can, of course, take the gain down, but we are being paid by the hour, and we don't have time to do that. So by turning on Simple, Resolve intelligently, using its color management system, brings all of the luminance data and color data within my legal range. So now I can go ahead and color correct right after that and apply a look without worrying about if I'm losing data. Now, right after this, now that I've converted this to Rec 709, I can go ahead and apply a creative LUT. But I don't want to do it on a clip-by-clip basis because I want to apply a look to the whole sequence. So very quickly, I'm going to jump and convert all my clips over to Rec 709. Now, this is a red weapon clip, and I converted it over to ProRes, and Red's brand new log G10. Excuse me, this list is never ending. And it gives us a little bit more contrast and brings us into a Rec 709 space. I'm going to do the same thing and copy this over to this shot, and the same thing for this one. Now, the reason I can do that for these 3 shots is because these are all red shots. I'm just going to copy this over because I'm not using a mouse, and I'm used to using a panel. Excuse me. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to copy the RE transform over to the other RE shot. And for the Blackmagic, I'm going to just apply a Blackmagic transform. And excellent. All of our footage is now looking much more normal now. If I go, we can see that we have a pretty decent looking sequence, except all of our clips are not matched. So because I know that you guys are more excited about looks, I'm going to go ahead and jump straight to timeline, and we'll match these later because that's boring. So what I want to do is apply a look to the whole sequence, and then we're going to tweak the look a little bit because you guys don't like to use one-touch looks because there's no such thing, right? So what I want to do is I'm going to apply different looks to different parts of the image. Now, of course, I can just apply a thriller look and go home and call it a day and build a client, but we're good creatives. We want to do something better than that. They can just use magic bullet looks if they wanted to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to combine a couple different looks using different LUTs and the qualifiers. So how many people are sort of advanced Resolve users here? Oh, okay, so I want to make sure that everybody understands this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add another parallel node. Now, parallel nodes are similar to if I had 2 layers next to each other with the opacity set to 50%. The signal is going through both of them, and then they're being combined at the same time. So if I apply a different thing to this clip, for instance, if I turn this blue and I turn this green, actually, let me make sure this is a little bit. You can see that it combines this transaction, essentially. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this same concept and we're going to use it to apply some creative LUTs. Now, what I mean by that is we're going to combine different LUTs. Now, say that I wanted a nice film look. Let's do a 3-strip look, which is, for those of you that like Wizard of Oz, this is what was used on Wizard of Oz. And let's say I want to put this at about 50%. I'm going to go into the key output, which is essentially opacity, and put that at 50%. And I'm going to add another LUT to this bottom one. Now, this one, I'm thinking of something a little bit crazy, so I'm going to go for something that's cross-processed. And let's go for something a little bit more intense. And we can continue going further by adding additional. And you can just sort of go nuts with this. So for instance, if I wanted to add, let's say I want to add ground control color, and I want to add this Hollywood LUT. Now, I don't like what this is doing to the rest of the image, but let's say I just want to apply it to the skin tone. Now, this is going to be a little bit ridiculous, but I'm just trying to make it so it's really obvious on the screen here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to key her skin tone right here. I'm going to do Shift-H so I can actually see what I'm keying. And I'm going to sample a little bit more of skin tone right there, and we're going to just really, really cheaply clean it up because, again, you guys are not that interested in watching me sit here and key. And if I Shift-H, this LUT is just being applied to the skin tones. And we can go even further. I can just, if I do one more parallel node, I go clean node graph. I'm going to go ahead and close my clip so I can see what's going on here. And let's add something really just out of this world. Let's go and add Rec. 709. And this is a black and white. Now let's say that I just want to apply this black and white to just the, let's say, the shadows. So I'm going to go to presets and do chroma dark. Now this preset, if you see right down here in this luminance, has keyed out just, in this case it's keyed out just my shadows. Now I'm going to adjust this just a tiny bit to bring in more shadows. And if I turn this on and off, we can see what this has done. And it's sort of given us a little bit of a milky shadow kind of look by adding that in there. Now I'm going to go ahead and reset this, but you sort of get the point that just because you have one LUT doesn't necessarily mean that you need to sort of stick with it. Now there's different things that you can do by layering LUTs as well. So for instance, let's go to a different shot. Let's go to this shot right here. Let's get out of timeline so I can adjust this real quickly. I'm going to add a new node right after that, and let's balance this just a tiny bit so it's not totally out of whack. How much fun is it watching me suffer in front of a laptop, right? It's awesome, huh? It's only half my regular rate. Cool, so this is a terrible looking image that looks somewhat all right on this 6-inch screen that I'm looking at. And what I'm going to do is apply a really, really extreme film look to this. You know what, I want to see something that you guys can see skin tones with, so I'm going to go back to this image right here. Skin tones are usually where you're going to have the most problem. So when you're doing nature stuff, it's usually fine. But it's when you get skin tones that stuff gets really freaky. So let me just turn this, as you can see. So this is a pretty good look. I like what it's doing to everything. Let's say I don't like what it's doing, for instance, to her skin. So I can go ahead and key out the skin. Or what I can do is add a layer node, which is essentially putting a layer above it at 100% opacity. And I can feed back her original skin tone above the LUT. So if I didn't like what it was doing, I can basically feed the original skin tone and texture back on top of that. So what I need to do with that is I need to do a quick key of her skin tone. I'm going to go into Shift H again to give myself a better view. Real quickly, just blur it all to heck. I can't let that one go slide. And by taking this opacity back, I'm able to really control how much of that LUT is affecting her skin tone. Now, you can see we have, it affects lots of things. So if I really wanted to go in there, I can go rotor out her eyes if I really didn't like what it was doing to her eyes, or if the actress very in particular said, I love my eyes this color and don't you change them. And you'd be amazed contractually what actors and actresses require in there. So one last thing that you guys have probably encountered quite a bit is you've probably been given or supplied a LUT that wasn't made for your footage. Maybe it was made for a different camera, or maybe it was made for log footage and you have Rec. 709 footage, or maybe vice versa. Well, what I want to show you guys how to do is how to use that same effect, that color transform effect, to essentially convert footage into a different type. So you can convert red to ARI, you can convert essentially any type that Blackmagic understands and has the color science built into it, you can convert back and forth from that. So, for instance, I don't have no problem with Blackmagic cameras and their color science. I think it's great, but it's not exactly ARI. And that's sort of the gold standard for colorists. So what I'm going to do is go to this color space transform, and instead of leaving it to use timeline, which is Rec. 709 2.4, I'm going to change it to ARI Alexa, and then ARI log C. Now if I turn this on and off, you can see it doesn't look like a major difference, but under the hood, I'm actually converting this from Blackmagic color science to ARI color science. Now to show you how this really, what the result of this is, I'm going to apply the ARI Alexa log C to Rec. 709 LUT at the end of it. And it looks perfect. Now, I could probably apply this LUT to the beginning, and it wouldn't look too funky. So let's try a different shot and see what happens. This is Ari, so that's not going to be so helpful. Let's do something more extreme. Let's go to this shot. And let's say that we have a Blackmagic LUT. So we're going to convert Ari Alexa log C to Blackmagic Design Film. Blackmagic Design Film. I'm going to add a new serial node, so the LUT happens right after our color space transform. I'm going to go into BMD Film Looks, go into Newman BMD Film, and I'm going to apply this 4000K LUT. Now, it's super underexposed because the LUT is expecting a perfectly exposed and color balanced image, and that is not what I gave it. So I'm going to add a serial beforehand. I'm going to adjust the exposure a tiny bit. And I'm going to correct the color balance. Actually, it's hard to correct color balance underneath a LUT because you don't know what you're doing versus what the LUT is doing. But you can see that this LUT is essentially made for Blackmagic footage, and it's working really well on this Ari shot. Now let me try a different one just to make sure that it's not a fluke. Let's do vintage tones. Yeah, this looks a little weird, so we don't know if this is the look or if this is actually a mistake, so I want to make sure. Let's do the dude. Now this is probably about right, and this also shows why naming LUTs is really nothing. Non-descriptive names like the dude is absolutely useless because it doesn't help me as a creative determine what does this do. 4000K tells me a little bit about color temperature, but other than that, these names are absolutely useless. But what I do know is that this is for a Blackmagic film camera, and by using the color space transform, I'm able to force a shot that was shot on a different camera to go through this LUT properly.
Thank you very much, Jason Bowdach.
You're welcome.